Now to the big one. Hearthstone Grandmasters is going to be phased out over the course of 2022, which means that we'll have a first season that is going to look a lot like the Grandmaster seasons that we've seen previously. And then the season after that is just going to be a few other Grandmasters together with some of the top performers in Master Tours, and just be like a last call type of thing for Worlds. The more relevant thing to talk about, or what I'm going to spend the most time on, is Grandmasters being cancelled, being phased out, and like how it affects the scene. Let's start with what the original goal for Grandmasters was. Because I was one of the first people, like in the absolute first season, that played in Grandmasters. So I got to take part in like their vision for it, what their goals were, like what their plans were. Basically, Grandmasters was introduced in a time where everyone had started each year from like square one. No matter who you were, how good you were, you and everyone else in the competitive scene started at the same place towards like going to Worlds. And for the very top players, this was getting kind of daunting, and it was enjoyable. They wanted like a way to take these superstars, or like these stars that had come out of the competitive scene, and make them like the faces of Hearthstone or Hearthstone Esports at the very least. To some extent, they wanted competitors to feel like they were rewarded for their consistent performances, like that they had something to work towards and something that people actually could take the time to commit to a Hearthstone full time. They wanted the people in the system to be able to have Hearthstone as their main income. But the main part was to really make these be like the big faces of Hearthstone. What happened though is that the original vision for this was great. I think that the first few seasons of Grandmasters, while of course there's a lot of criticism to what happened outside of Grandmasters, I think that Grandmasters was on track to do what it was supposed to do in the first few seasons. We had exciting matches on Twitch, high viewership with players interviews that really made people bond with the players. The promotion could have been a lot better, but like I really feel like it was going in the right direction, talking about Grandmasters only, like as a program, like ignoring all of the bad things that came outside of Grandmasters. Like I'm talking about Grandmasters specifically now. Where it started, or where it really went wrong, though, is that in 2 years ago, I think it was, Activision struck a deal with YouTube, which was mainly for the Overwatch League, and then which I find like offensive to this day, they kind of just threw in Hearthstone Esports in this YouTube deal that they were doing. I know this for a fact, that this was something that the people on Hearthstone Esports were not involved in at all, and they were completely blindsided by it. And they got to know about this deal happening like at the very same time, like as everyone else. Like they read the announcement and they were like, it was right before a Grandmaster season was about to start as well. They were like, oh, we're doing everything on YouTube. What this did to the system was that no one doubted it. If Twitch broadcasts go to YouTube, the viewership is gonna plummet. It's just gonna crash, which is what it did. And that defeated the whole main purpose of the Grandmasters, which was to like really promote these players, like make them the faces of Hearthstone Esports. There were plans to let the Grandmasters like even stream their games on Twitch. That was one of the big plans they had. The YouTube deal is an exclusive deal. It means that Hearthstone Esports just can't have content on Twitch if it's involved in their scene. So co-stream. I think that Grandmasters can technically co-stream on, or like stream their like group matches on YouTube. Like obviously we don't see the big streamers make that switch. And like I don't think it would be very successful if they wanted to stream their competitive matches there. Also, I don't know if they can. So take that with a grain of salt. And then there's just like a bunch of things that I don't think that people really think of as being as relevant, but they took away player interviews, which, I mean, it was right after the Blitzchung thing, but I heard that it was something about like, I don't know, I heard some other things like to why the player interviews were removed, but removing those, all of a sudden you just had some faces on a screen. I was one of the most like passionate people about watching Grandmasters and the best people play, but at some point, like, I just saw some faces, like got some expressions out of them, but I couldn't learn anything about them, even though some of them are like personal friends. But it just like got kind of unexciting. For the sake of like promoting players, they weren't even being promoted anymore. And at this point, I think that to me it was kind of obvious that Grandmaster as a program had just failed, and that it was just a matter of time before we had to get rid of it. That being said, like, I didn't think that we would see it phased out this year already. There's some people getting really hurt by this as well. The problem here, of course, is there are people in the Grandmaster system that have worked their way to get into Grandmasters and are reaping the benefits of it. A lot of people, it's been their dream to make it to Grandmasters. Like, while it has seemed like a very unattainable goal for most, the ones that have made it are very proud of it, and rightfully so. Like, it's huge to be able to be part of Grandmasters. And I feel even extra sorry for those that have just qualified recently and got the news that they get to play one season, but yeah, then there's really no more. It's a huge blow. I really feel for these. Turns out that like from Grandmasters alone, in some countries, like you earn about like an average 10k per season. I know, at least when I played, and I don't think the pricing has changed too much. I mean, with the upside of course being able to go to Worlds, but just a few of the players did that, where the prize pool is huge. 20k a year is not exactly something you can make a living of. So in some countries, which is important to note. Like, for example, where I live in Sweden, it comes nowhere close. But in some countries, I know that in particular the South American regions, you get a very long way on this. And the prize money from the Master Tours and the Grandmaster money has been like, I mean, like a blessing to them. To those people where this like is enough to get by, the program is filling its purpose, right? I also know that those scenes are just like way better at promoting their players and building storylines about their players than we are here in some other parts of the world. So like over there, the Grandmaster system is really just like, it's working. It's doing what like the goals were for Grandmasters. Like, we see a perfect example how it would be if it worked overall over in South America, I think. Like, we also see that with just like the South American talent that has exploded compared to other places in the world. I think it's amazing to see because the region is really cool and has a lot of great players that I don't think are appreciated enough. But to those people that made it there and are now getting cut short of it with no consistent way, you can say all you want that, well, you play Hearthstone to have fun, but like real life doesn't really work that way. If you want to invest a lot of time into something, and like which is required to stay on top, there needs to be some reward for it to work. And Grandmaster was a consistent reward for them to be able to justify the time being spent. But outside of Grandmasters now, there will only be the occasional Master Tours that you're not guaranteed prize money in, which is a thing I'll get back to. Yeah, you really don't have a consistent way to make money of it. And while I don't think that money should be like the main motive for playing a game most of the time, or I mean, it's like you can't deny that it's a factor to being able to invest time into something. And taking away all of the consistent ways to make money really makes it so most people won't be able to, or like none will probably be able to just have competitive play as their only income, because that could very easily go wrong because you have no guarantee of that working out. I want to add this, and to some this is gonna sound like I'm putting salt in the wounds, and I don't mean it that way, But one of the most important lessons I learned throughout my 7-year-long career in this is something that Frodan drilled into me very, very, very early. And it was to diversify. He kept telling this to competitive players, went big early on, like me, Thais, Lento, like you name it, that if you want to stay in the esports scene, diversify, build your brand. Like, if you get huge competitive results, just don't tunnel vision on that. You build your stream, build your channels, build your brand, make sure, why should people follow you? Make people interested in you. It's basically like you're going up on a stage and you have a ton of, the crowd is huge. On that stage, sure, you can do your thing and walk off, but you could also make something really extra from it that people will remember and follow you for, and then eventually build that into something that, well, if income is the thing, generates income. Basically what I'm saying here is that I think that a lot of the people that have been getting the opportunity they are competitively skilled, they go to Grandmasters. It's hard, it's really hard work. I know this myself as a streamer and content creator, in extra effort into streaming, into building your brand, into building channels. That will make you go by. That's why I did it. I got knocked out of Grandmasters, and while I had a pretty big name already, but that's something I've worked towards as well. So I mean, you could say oh, you already had all of this, but did I put in the work? So some people could definitely learn from this to try and make something more out of their time on the big stage, I think, because there's a lot of opportunity there and you never know what these opportunities lead to. This only goes for some, though. I know that some people in Grandmasters have tried super hard at this. We see some super successful examples. For example, No Hands Gamer has built a big stream, has a big YouTube channel, things like that. Really, that's a prime example. I am very impressed by No Hands and how he has leveraged his success into Grandmasters to do something bigger. There's also some people that have worked super hard. Maybe it's luck, maybe it's just that they haven't worked the right way and it hasn't worked out of it, and now they're getting kind of taken off stage. And to those, it sucks. But I really want to emphasize how important it is to build character. You can do this yourself. You should also expect the program, and I think that the program has been lacking in terms of promoting their own players in the system. I think it's fair to expect at the highest level some good kind of promotion from, I'd like to criticize them on that point. I think it could have been done better. And I think that we really see the benefits of it in regions where local communities are good at doing this. The French community, South American community, all these are amazing examples of that. All of this being said, I think that this is a good change though. I don't think that it's perfect yet, but making the program more accessible to more people is something some people seem to. I'm not sure if people weren't playing or if they've just forgotten how big of a competitive scene we had right before Grandmasters was introduced. The scene was huge. We had a lot of players, but with the introduction of Grandmasters, it just took the ability away from most people to feel like they had a chance of achieving the goal they had, and it drew away a big part of our competitive scene. We kind of learned how to live with this throughout the years, and now it's kind of normal. But as someone who played through all these years, that was the biggest blow the competitive scene have ever taken. While the damage is done, I do think that if we perfect the system and make it better over time, maybe we gradually see people coming back and new people wanting to compete in the system. That's the dream. But I think there are some things that need to be resolved if we want this to happen. One point of feedback I've seen, and that I touched a little bit on earlier, is that need to have some guaranteed reward for players that invest the time into the system. I'm privileged enough that I don't really mind if I walk away without a few $100 from a master tour. But to some people that don't have other income from Hearthstone, the time investment they do to qualify, to be able to sustain that, like having the guaranteed like get $800 at some point for just competing in a master tours, for getting there. That was when travel was a thing, sure, but still, like, you got the reward already for being there, and that felt good. I think this is something that needs to be introduced if you want people to get like the drive to being able to afford the drive for competing in the system. Thing is that we can't just make up money. The budget is what it is. So the solution that I've seen and that I like, I don't think people really understand the implications of it. Maybe I don't even, but I'm sure I have a good idea. And is to cut down the people playing in Master Tours by half. We can see here that there's 400 people playing in each Master Tour, which is kind of a lot. It's like it's cutting it in half. It's kind of feeding the purpose of trying to widen the amount of people that gets to experience the competitive scene. But I think it's kind of a necessary evil, so that Eric Elliott said on Twitter that they want, like, ideally, they would like people to get like $500 minimum, which to me sounds fair, but then again, I'm not the best person to ask, or like how far that goes for people. But I like the idea of it, that each player in the Master Tour is getting rewarded something for committing all the time to qualifying for it. It will make the qualifying process more cutthroat. Like, you have to half the number of people to qualify for qualifiers and through ladder, and it's going to be a lot harder, but I think it's worth it for the feeling that you're absolutely getting rewarded. I'm not certain if this is the way to go, because I also feel like at this point you might make it so that it feels unattainable for quite a lot of people. But you also lose guaranteed invites through Grandmasters with the system being phased out. So maybe it wouldn't be like that big of a deal to the qualifying system. But that's the next step I would like to see, to cut down the number of people playing in the Master Tours, but awarding everyone prize money for getting there. Also, last thing, while we're on the subject of Grandmasters, I want to put emphasis on how important it is that we're phasing out Grandmasters. A lot of people just want to like, oh, I hope Grandmasters is gone. And I'm very, very, very happy they're not doing this. Because that was one of the biggest things with like the announcement in 2028 or whenever it was. Sorry, don't remember. The thing that every player was expecting that they could work for was just cut off right away. That feeling of just having this like straight up just taken away from you feels really bad. And it goes the other direction too. Like, it's just not a fair way of doing it to the people that have been promised a spot in Grandmasters or the people participating in Grandmasters. I really like that it's like 48 Grandmasters into less Grandmasters into abolishing the system. And that will like lessen the blow for a lot of people. And I think it's a good thing that they just didn't cut the program straight up, even though I think that eventually getting rid of it is a good thing. And on that note, the YouTube deal is actually expiring next year. Getting rid of the Grandmaster system and then getting back on Twitch for next year gives the program like endless potential to do something new and cool, like evolve this system. While I think that 2022 might still be a rough year, although I think that we will see an upwards trajectory throughout next year. I think that 2023 is really when we can see Hearthstone Esports like prosper again. Or my fingers are crossed at least. The YouTube deal running out and being back on Twitch is going to be big for the system.